So the Google Pixel 9 Pro is here, and with it comes a pretty beautiful new form factor in my opinion. This is the Pixel 9 XL model that I've got here, and so of course we have to compare it against the current king, in my opinion, of Android smartphone cameras right now, the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Right, so we kick off with a front-facing video comparison. Both of the audios are going to be kind of fed by the phone itself. The Google Pixel 9 Pro actually comes with an upgrade of front-facing video cameras, or front-facing cameras this year, so that's actually pretty exciting. You should potentially see a pretty significant difference. I'll show you some video, I'll also show you some photos, and then we'll go back and forward, and I'll also show you some inside video as well. Pretty gloomy day in London today. Unfortunately, and definitely are some spots of rain about, so forgive, there are going to be lots of inside museum shots today. But yeah, hopefully it will give you guys a good idea about the cameras. Here's a quick note on that last video sample. I actually realized that I was recording the audio with the Pixel's speech enhancement on, so that's why it actually does sound significantly better, especially in a noisy environment like London. From what I could see, the Samsung doesn't have a similar feature, so obviously one to bear in mind. The Pixel does sound much better. Here's an indoor video sample this time. This was inside the Natural History Museum. Still quite a lot of natural light because it's kind of an open natural light environment. So this for me is where you'll start to see a trend, and this trend is about dynamic range. It's interesting that we're even seeing this on the selfie camera. The Google Pixel phone basically just always wants to manage the exposure in the image. It always wants almost everything in that image exposed in a correct way. And whilst it's obviously good in certain situations, it's actually not almost like true to life. When you're looking at someone's face, if their face is dark, generally the background will be overexposed. The Google Pixel almost wants to like fight this at every opportunity. You can see that in some of the front-facing images here. And another thing to note is that the Google Pixel 9 Pro has a wider selfie camera. Definitely on the video side, where you don't actually have an option to change from the wide angle to a slightly tighter angle on the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. The Galaxy S24 Ultra is a lot more zoomed in than the image on the Pixel 9 Pro XL. So I thought I'd throw up some photos from the front-facing cameras as well. It's interesting always to see these side by side. So obviously what we've discussed as well, the wideness of the Pixel camera versus the S24 Ultra camera. So if that's important for you with your selfies, I actually think as well the evenness of the exposure on the selfie camera in decent light for the Pixel 9 Pro actually looks nicer overall, in my opinion. The Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra is definitely a bit less processed, but it's a little bit sharper, and I would say actually you get the benefit of some of these smoothing algorithms that you actually almost like want in a selfie photo. That's just my personal preference. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about these rear-facing cameras. And the most significant difference in terms of hardware on these two camera systems is that on the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, you actually have a 4-camera optical zoom setup, whereas it's a 3-camera optical zoom setup on the Pixel 9 Pro XL, and that is a spread across the Pixel 9 Pro range. What is actually really nice is that they are a full set of 50 megapixel shooters on the Pixel 9 XL, so the ultra wide is a 50 megapixel now, the main rear-facing camera is a 50 megapixel, and the telephoto is as well. So that is a really nice thing. You're getting a really consistent feel between the lenses. On the Pixel 9 Pro, you of course have an ultra wide lens. You have their main rear-facing camera, which is actually a 200 megapixel sensor, and we will talk about that a little bit later. You have a 3x telephoto, which I believe is a 12 megapixel shooter on this camera, and then you have a 5x optical, and that's also a 50 megapixel on this lens. So you get more coverage of optical zoom range from the S24 Ultra, and definitely the zoom potential is actually one area that the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra really excels in, and also I would say is one of the main key selling features. You've got a zoom up to 100x with the space zoom feature. This is really where Samsung are kind of almost like hedging their bets. There really a lot of focus is in that zoom range potential. Whilst that 3x lens isn't going to be the highest quality lens in the world, of course it is great. You still have access to an optical zoom range around that 3x level. I'm actually just going to give you guys a whole bunch of image comparisons here because I actually think that's almost like the most helpful thing. You guys this way can just make your mind up on which you think is actually a more kind of pleasing image processing unit inside each camera. So I think the overwhelming feeling is that a lot of these are actually very, very similar. I think certainly in daylight situations, the cameras handle themselves very, very similar. This was probably the only outlier shot. I think this is probably a bit of a random kind of experience on the S24 Ultra. I think if I took another shot, it probably would have fixed that exposure there. These are all 12 megapixel images, so they're basically kind of the standard JPEGs out of the camera. And then we will move on to higher resolution images in a little bit. bit. I don't know about you guys, I think in this particular environment, things looking kind of very similar. It was unfortunate I wasn't able to test like sunset shots and skyline shots, that type of thing, but that will all come in the full review of the Pixel 9 Pro camera. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and move over to some 50 megapixel shots. These are the higher resolution photos available. Like I said, on the Pixel, you get full access to 50 megapixels on all of your lenses. On the S24 Ultra, you get a 50 megapixel access in the 1x mode and also a 200 megapixel, and then a 50 megapixel access in the 5x. So those are the only lenses that you can get 50 megapixel shots on. Here is an example of a 200 megapixel photo, and just for comparison's sake, let's zoom into maybe 700% on each photo, just so you can kind of see how much scale you can get. I do actually love the 200 megapixel shots out of the S24 Ultra. They're just a basically ungodly file size. So let's talk about the Pixel look, because I think this is very important when we're talking about these two phones, and overall I think it's probably the main difference, apart from those optical zoom ranges, between the performance of the cameras. And it's basically the fact that the Google Pixel look has a particular style. This is a very HDR-y image. I myself am not a massive fan of this, I have to admit. I tend to prefer my images to look a little bit more natural. The images that come out of the Pixel are very, very computational. Everything looks very clinical and very kind of exposed in the correct way, but it's just not generally how a camera tends to perform. It even goes down to things like actual processing on people's faces and skin. I mean, the Samsung does this too as well. I won't say that it doesn't do any, but it's a little bit less on the S24 Ultra than it is on the Pixel. This definitely comes down to preference. There are some people that are going to absolutely love the Pixel phone look. On the S24 Ultra is definitely a more standardized smartphone camera look. It just looks like a really nice smartphone camera, as opposed to on the Pixel, I could probably pick a Pixel shot out of the lineup, I would say 9 times out of 10. Okay, so let's talk about shutter lag. Both of these phones historically have had slight problems with shutter lag. Samsung always used to be a bit more of an issue. The Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra has pretty much sorted all of that out. The camera performance in terms of shutter performance is really fantastic on this phone now. The Pixel 9 is actually an interesting one. All of the performance in the 12 megapixel modes, the standard modes on the phones, are absolutely fine. You're not going to get any issue whatsoever. What does become a little bit interesting is when you go up to those 50 megapixel modes, because both phones do the processing ever so slightly differently. So first, if you snap a photo in 50 megapixels on the Pixel 9 Pro, first of all, it's going to take a little while to take, just to actually process that image a little bit longer, and then you'll go onto that photo and it will say processing, and that will kind of happen before you can actually look at that shot. So overall, this does take a little while, I have to admit. On the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, things are handled a little bit differently. You take that photo and that is pretty much instant, when the processing is happening almost slightly in the background. When you hop onto this image, you're going to have the same thing happening. It will take a little while to process before you can actually view that image, but I actually do think the process is a little bit better on the S24 Ultra, because you're actually able to take that photo and then move on straight away. You know, every time you're not always going to want to tap in on that photo, whereas on the Pixel, it does take a little while before you can actually even kind of move on and take another shot. So we've covered front-facing video, but let's talk about rear-facing video performance. I've got a couple of video examples here. They're both from inside. I've got a lower light environment coming up in a bit, and that's side by side. But first off, we'll just start with one after the other, full 4K. So this is in Ultra HD on both phones here. And you can see that I think both perform really well. I did some walking around as well, because stabilization has previously been a bit of an issue when we're talking about smartphone video performance, especially with Android phones. I think the stabilization is good on both. This is with Video Boost turned off. I will cover Video Boost much more thoroughly in my Pixel Pro 9 review, so definitely have no fear, that will be covered. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail. Here is the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra footage. Again, I kind of just tried as best as possible to do the same route. What's interesting is that the Samsung, again, I would say like retains better exposure overall. The Pixel is actually really good, and I think this scene actually benefits both cameras. I think there's pretty much not much at all to really choose between the two lenses, between the two smartphones here. But that does change a little bit when we get into a trickier environment, as you're about to see. But yeah, I certainly think in terms of detail, resolution, kind of quality and colors, this particular test was very, very close between these two devices. Here's a side-by-side video comparison, so you can kind of get a feel for both of the cameras, rear-facing video, both side by side. And I would obviously say the biggest difference with this one is the exposure differences, which of course you can see. I think the Pixel 9 Pro and its tendency to kind of expose everything in a very even way in this scene, there's a lot of artificial light, it's a lower light environment, actually absolutely nails it. I think the Galaxy S24 Ultra actually looks a bit overexposed in areas, definitely. So it's an interesting one to see the kind of like the computational advantages of the Pixel actually smash it here. Things definitely get a bit closer when we look at a more zoomed in image because there's less exposures going on in the frame. But yeah, definitely good results here for the Pixel 9 Pro. A big upgrade this year is that the Pixel 9 Pro actually shoots 8K video if you use Video Boost, and that is kind of an important detail. So it doesn't actually shoot true 8K, it's being digitally upscaled using AI and based on the cloud. We will talk about Video Boost a little bit later. The Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra actually does shoot true 8K footage. This isn't something I use a lot of, I have to admit. I think is a bit of a gimmick, especially from a smartphone. I tend to just stick in 4K on both of these phones. One area that I really wanted to see improved on the Google Pixel 9 Pro lineup is lens switching in video. Android phones just always seem to have a problem with this. The S24 Ultra does it a little bit, but I would suggest that it's actually a lot better than most Android phones in this category. The Pixel 8 and the Pixel 8 Pro had a serious issue with this, and I'm pleased to say that it has been improved, but it's still not perfect. So when you switch between lenses, you can see that there are basically times when it's using the old lens and it's not actually allowing you to use the lens that you want to use, if that makes sense. You see a visible snap when it like actually goes to the lens that you want to use. It's a bit of a weird phenomenon. The only phone that actually nails this 100% of the time is the iPhone. iPhone video performance, as I talk about a lot on this channel, is significantly better than Android video performance in my opinion. So you have two stages of this, is that the first video that you actually capture on your phone using the Pixel 9 will have these issues. But then basically what's happening is if you enable Video Boost on these videos, it will allow you to upload that video kind of in the background to the cloud, and it will process and fix a lot of these issues. And this is one area that is dramatically reduced using Video Boost. So it's probably topical now to talk about Video Boost because I am seriously not a fan of this feature. Don't get me wrong, it is quite a cool concept that you can essentially have the video that you shoot basically be enhanced digitally in the cloud. You don't have to do anything. The issue that I have is that I believe that all of this should be happening on your phone in the first place. The camera hardware that we have inside these smartphones now is so fantastic. You only have to look at this with the iPhone 15 Pro. Shooting log video on that phone is absolutely exceptional. It's the best smartphone video I have ever shot ever. And it doesn't use a feature like Video Boost. You shouldn't have to wait for potentially hours for your footage to upload, improve, and download again to your phone to actually see things like optical lens switching in video to be working. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad feature. I just actually disagree with some of the reasons this is actually being implemented. I think a company like Google is just definitely sophisticated enough to come up with a way to actually handle this on the device itself. And then we come to some of the AI modes that are a significant difference this year between the Pixel 9 Pro and the Pixel 8 Pro, and also a significant difference between the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra and the Pixel 9 Pro. Most notably, there's a feature called Add Me, which Google are talking about a lot, and basically it allows you to take a group shot without actually being a group shot. It's kind of a bit weird. I'll show you a little example here. If you're like me, you can actually add yourself in a photo if you have no friends. But as you can see, it basically allows you to kind of like composite yourself over a group photo, so you don't actually have to ask somebody else to take the photo for you. I think this is cool. Look, I think if you buy the Pixel 9, you probably will end up using this once or twice, and then I think you'll stop. I never really agree with these features being like promoted as like headline features because the amount of times you use this is probably going to be very, very small and minimal. I guess overall, this is a feature that the Pixel has, the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra doesn't have, so sure, this is a win for the Pixel. There's another area here. This is called Reimagine AI on the Pixel 9 Pro, and it basically is generative AI for your photos. Again, this is something which I personally would never use. I just think that it is just something like, for instance, if I was going to do this, I would do it in Photoshop. But again, that's, I guess, you know, I work in this type of arena and industry. It's very, very useful potentially for just general consumers to have access to a feature like this. It basically allows you to just reimagine a section of your photos with prompts. Like I say, this is one of those things, it's available if you want to use it. And so I guess we come overall to which I think is almost like better value for the money, which is a better choice. I would say that we're almost getting to the point with Android devices now where this is entirely based on image preference as opposed to camera performance and camera hardware. For me, the biggest difference is the fact that the Pixel look is so significantly different to the Samsung look. I guess if you're a fan of the slightly HDR-y look of photos that come out of the Pixel 9 Pro with a serious sprinkle of AI into the mix, this is a phone you're absolutely going to want to check out.